I grew up in a large New York Italian family, and there was always a collection of odd people at our dinner table on Sunday afternoons. My favorite group of these were the group that my grandparents referred to as the housekeepers. And my favorite one of those was Janice. Her real name wasn't Janice, her real name was Mary, but we called her Janice, and it kind of fit. And the odd thing about Janice was not just that she was a housekeeper. We were not a wealthy family. And so the fact that we had somebody that was a housekeeper was odd in and of itself. But Janice never cleaned a damn thing. She would sit out on the back porch, and she would smoke cigarettes and sit in my grandparents' rocking chair. She had long, frizzy, reddish hair, and she would rock back and forth, and while my grandmother was cleaning inside, you could hear her sing, "Try just a little bit harder." And so in the morning, I would go to kindergarten, and I would learn how to sit quietly in the containment of my carpet square, raise my hand and speak only when I was asked to speak. And in the afternoons, I would make the long walk back to my grandparents' house, where I would spend the day with Janice Joplin. Janice taught me everything a 6-year-old needed to know in the 60s. She taught me that if you're going to make a liquid come out of your nose, that it should be ginger ale, because unless there were bubbles, what was the point? She taught me that you could walk a cat on a string the same way you could walk a dog on a leash if you were willing to tug a little bit and let the cat walk behind you. And she taught me that one well-placed artificial fart under the arm could take the place of 1,000 words. And so this was my life. And so quickly fall turned into winter, and when it got too cold to take the cat for a tug, we settled into the Olympics. And now in 1968, everything was about Jean-Claude Killy, and he was incredible. He won 3 gold medals. He was the first man that could really rock a winter unitard. I don't know if you remember that. But the real Olympics that year was about the battle in the luge between the Italians and the Germans. My family was half Italian and half German, so this was really meaningful. The Germans ended up winning the medal, and then in a stroke of unfortune, the Olympic Committee took their medals and said they had cheated. They had heated the sled, and so they took the medals away. And in a protest of this, after the Olympics were over, Janice, my cousin, and my brother and I decided to recreate the Winter Olympics in my grandparents' banister. Now, it's not that we hadn't been down the banister on many occasions. We had, but most of the time that we went down the banister, we went down on our bottoms, head up. And Janice thought if we put a pillow around our waist, we could go down head first. And you would have enormous velocity, but you wouldn't lose any of the maneuverability. So we thought, yeah, this is perfect. Let's do this. Janice also decided that if we took one of those industrial laundry baskets, the kind that were made out of canvas and had metal rollers on the bottom, and if we put it right at the bottom of the staircase with some pillows, we could land in that, skid across the front foyer, thus creating sort of a bobsled effect at the end of the luge run. To this day, my family fondly refers to this sport as the luge bob. The course was really difficult. There was a really giant dip at the front, and then you came through a 180-degree hairpin turn, and then there was a little bit of a flat section down into the giant slalom. So you had to have enough speed to make it across the plateau, but not too much, or you would careen off and hit your head on the wall. So when the grown-ups went out, and my cousins and I and Janice were left, we set off. My brother was the first one down the run, and like most oldest brothers, he was wildly out of control. He came down the first run, into the 180 hairpin, off into the right head first into the plaster. He was disqualified. My cousin came next. He made it down the first section, barely made it around the 180 turn, but he didn't have quite enough speed, so he really slowed down in the plateau. He made it all the way down to the bottom. He landed in the laundry basket and just kind of skidded a couple of inches. But he was in first place. And then Janice looked at me and said, "You're up, kid." She strapped on the pillow. I climbed onto the banister. I made my way down the first section, picking up enough speed, barely making it around the 180-degree turn, across the plateau, down the giant slalom, landed squarely into the basket, skid across the front hallway, out the door, across the street, sticking the landing on Mrs. Tilley's lawn right in front of her frozen bird bath. Later that afternoon, I was awarded the gold medal, which is a chocolate coin that hung on a string repurposed from the cat's leash. It was one of the most proud days of my life. My brother, still reeling from the agony of defeat, refused to come to the ceremony, but then when he learned, oh, there's snacks, I'm definitely in for that. Winter turned to spring. And in the spring, my grandmother sat me down at the kitchen table when I came home from kindergarten one day, and she said, "Janice is leaving." And I said, "What do you mean she's leaving?" And he said, "She's going back to be with her family." And I said, "But we're her family." My grandmother said, "Well, sometimes people can have more than one family, and Janice is ready to go back and live with hers." And I could tell from a look on my grandmother's face that this was really complicated. And so I didn't ask any more questions, but I thought that term, "she's ready to go back and live with her family," was really odd. And so the next week, when she was ready to go, Janice and I stood at the bottom of the Luge Bob Run, and I could just feel the tears welling up in my chest, and all I could say is, "I really wish you wouldn't go." And she patted me on the head, and she stuck her hand inside of her shirt. She gave me an artificial fart under the arm. She walked out. She got into my grandfather's car. She rolled down the window as they headed off down the street. I could hear her singing, "Oh, Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz?" I looked at my grandma and I was like, "We have a Mercedes-Benz?" My grandma was like, "No, we have a Volkswagen, but it's okay." It took me years to understand that Janice wasn't a housekeeper. Janice was a patient at the psychiatric hospital where my grandfather worked. And she had come to live at our house because when my grandfather was asked by the nursing staff if she could please have more medication, because she was so delusional, she thought she was Janis Joplin. And my grandfather refused that and said she doesn't need more medication. More medication is not going to make her better. What she needs is to live in the community. She needs to remember what it means to care about a family and to have a family care about her. And so she came to live at our house. I don't know whatever happened to Janice, but I know that I'm so grateful to my grandparents for teaching me that if you set an extra place at the table, the most interesting people will show up. And I will always be grateful to Janice. Because of her, I became a musician and a mental health counselor and the youngest person ever to win a gold medal in the Luge Bob. Thanks.